What do you make of this whole, drama at the moment?
It's sad, and it's sad. I think people have different perspectives. Some people have the perspective that MTN is at the short end of the government's wielding a big stake, and some people feel that the government is probably overreaching. And there's also the school of thought that thinks that MTN has, behaved badly and should be made to pay. The reality is that whichever way you look at it, it has implications for the market. It has implications for the way investors perceive ease of doing business in the market and all of that story. But the reality is this is a problem, and a problem that has to be fixed. And has to be fixed in a very structured and disciplined manner that ensures that investors don't lose confidence in the market, and as well that the government as well owns up or steps up to its responsibility of ensuring that people behave properly. Finding a balance is going to be quite a challenge here.
It's pretty tricky. I agree with you on that last statement. I mean, MTN keeps issuing statements, to defend, its own stance on this matter. The CBN, on the other side, also has what it has to say on the matter as well. But just like we said, do we sit back and look out for more investigation on the issue? Because MTN seems to say, we've really done nothing wrong. We've been in this country for years. We've contributed our quota, and we do not understand what's playing out here. It's
easy to always look at things from a political perspective or try to find some form of coloration for these conversations. But look, you read the CBN statement. It's very clear, it's very categorical on what the infractions are. The tax one was out of the blues. No one was expecting that. We thought the $8 billion was the big number, and then there's a tax number that's being talked about as well. But the truth is, Nigeria as a country has kind of reached a point of inflection as it relates to corporate behavior. We've been very clear that in the last 3 years, this government has been very clear about people paying their taxes and just ensuring that the rules are followed. The biggest challenge, companies like MTN, and the truth is that I would be shocked if MTN was the only company being investigated right now. A lot of people have been investigated. We had the tax forgiveness period of VADs, people coming to self-declare. You see how much was declared on VADs. That tells you the extent to which people had been gaming the system. So, we're in a difficult situation. Ghana's listing, MTN is listing in Ghana. It's in trouble in Nigeria. You can almost say that, look, is the government doing the right thing? But we must always find a balance. The country, we keep insisting, I mean, your previous conversation with Ege was talking about our debt profile. We have to borrow. We've had to borrow simply because people were not paying their obligations. People were not meeting their tax obligations to the government and all of that. So as a people, we have to collectively find a solution to these problems. Now, I'm hoping that MTN and the federal government can find a middle ground and fix this problem before it becomes more damaging to the industry as a whole. I mean, the telecoms industry has gone through significant challenges. We're still dealing with the 9 mobile issues. And I think the government has to be pragmatic in finding a solution.
But my biggest concern really is, I think it's always better, when these issues are tackled really early. We're talking $8.1 billion here. And that did not just, leave the country within a space of 2 months. It's been going on for a while. We're talking about tax now worth $2 billion, Femi. And I'm saying, what kind of monitoring system do we have in place? The report I read earlier, we had the CBN also talking about the fact that it was as a result of some kind of, would I call it now, whistleblowing? That's the Office of the Attorney General saying a whistleblower prompted the investigation. So if a whistleblower did not come forward, whatever it is, be it true or not, would have just continued over time. And that really just made me worry, really, to say how much more is going on with other companies here in Nigeria. By the time he comes up with big figures of 50 billion, 80 billion, then it seems as if, the government is coming after you for a particular cause. But then, what stops us from nipping this in the bud?
Look, I think that, in the previous years, government didn't rely on taxes significantly as much as we've had to in the last 3 years because of the recession. I think that the fact that the oil prices were high just made us institutionally lazy as a country. You're seeing a different perspective now. Look, I mean, we've had tax people in our offices literally every month coming to audit our numbers and all of that. The point is that as a country, institutionally, for once, we're starting to now see the customs. I mean, customs generated its highest ever revenue last month. We're starting to see those institutions focus on delivering service, and that has to just be positive for the country.
Well, let's just move to Ghana now and what's playing out there. But then, of course, Collins Appiah is supposed to be talking to us about what's playing out in Ghana, yet to get Collins going on. So let me just go back to what we're talking about, really, and the fact that Nigeria is really putting taxation in front of it all, and the government isn't smiling on that matter. Everyone has to come forward to pay what they need to pay. But then, Femi, let's talk about MTN. Remember, MTN still had a case a couple of years ago, and what I call it now, part of the measures to get back at MTN was to ensure that they also list. I'm saying to myself, where I was about to celebrate what MTN is listed in Ghana, I'm saying, with what's playing out, do you think MTN will ever list on Nigeria Stock Exchange?
I think the prospects are becoming bleaker, you know, if that word exists. The truth is that the corporate challenges and corporate governance issues that MTN is having to deal with today will take a few years to resolve. I don't see that company settling into, you know, some form of regular operations to the point where we can do a listing. So I mean, as an investment banker, I wouldn't even be advising them to list at this point in time. If they're having challenges in Ghana, reaching their valuation expectations, trust me, it's going to be worse in Nigeria, given all the negative news around the brand. I think that, look, and I'm sure they have advisors, they have a very good board at the MTN level, but what is becoming more important for MTN now is there's got to be this self-reflection by the organization and saying, look, we've had these issues. A lot of them are historical, in fairness to the current management. However, there are issues that need to be dealt with. And I expect to see a lot more of this for other companies, for other big multinationals who haven't basically played according to the book.
Even with the telcos, and Femi, it's actually coming, it's there. I read that in the headlines, I think yesterday. Some telecoms companies are still flouting that rule about registering SIM cards. And I'm saying to myself, when the government comes after these companies...
We're quite foul. And I think that's the point I was making earlier on. The corporate industry, that whole body of corporate leaders have to understand that the long-term benefit of the country growing, and not just growing, but growing in a sustainable way and everyone meeting their obligations, is something that we can't trade off at this point in time as a country. And finding that balance between delivering spectacular returns to your shareholders and making sure that every other stakeholder is adequately taken care of is the balance that every single board has to find. And you know, as leaders in these companies, the responsibility is on us to deliver that level of performance both to our shareholders as well as to the government and employees. Finding that balance is extremely important on a go-forward basis.
But how do you see this going forward, really, at the end of the day? I see this dragging on to the government gets what they want, you know. MTN on one side is definitely not going to back down with the defense because, I mean, but again, the question on the banks that were involved also comes to mind. You know, I mean, that's a discussion for another day. And the role that was played out there. Do you see some kind of settlement playing out at the end of the day?
I think it depends, honestly, on how far the government wants to pull this. I have a strong feeling that because MTN is one of many, the government would want to push this as far as they can. Just to send a clear message to the corporate industry, to the corporate world that, look, we're not going to tolerate people flouting the rules, if indeed MTN did. I think that the courts are going to play out over the next few years. We'll see some very interesting challenges in court and all of that. But it sets the tone for how the country is going to run, at least under this government. And you know, we just have to find a balance between this and wielding a big stick every time.
Well, thank you so much, Femi. Fantastic.